Beethoven Frieze, which dates to 1902. The theme of the Beethoven Frieze, well, it's again extremely complicated. So this is the 14th Secession exhibition of 1902. It was designed to celebrate one work of art, which was Max Klinger's portrayal of Beethoven. The sculpture exists and is now in Leipzig in the National Collection there. The decoration of the Secession building was given entirely over to this project and was to represent, in the case of Klimt's section, the Ode to Joy and the Ninth Symphony. The poster was by Alfred Roller, you see it here on the right hand side, and was based on his mural decoration for the room which actually displayed Max Klinger's sculpture, and was supposed to represent sinking night. It's a woman, as you can see here, with wings and a ball in her hand, and this is supposed to be the sun setting. The Beethoven exhibition was often described as the absolute zenith of the Gesamtkunstwerk theme. Everybody worked together. It was a collaboration of many artists. Roller, Böhm, Ferdinand Andre. Here is the sculpture itself. It scandalized society at the time because Beethoven is naked, as you can see, apart from the drapery over his knee. There's all sorts of strange elements coming out of the chair behind him, is mixed media. And these are supposed to be the muses that have inspired Beethoven. And then there's this absolutely giant eagle, as you can see, again, looking up. Again, inspiration, we assume. And the idea was that when you went to visit the exhibition, and on the opening night, just the opening night, Mahler had a reduced orchestra positioned within the exhibition to play the Ninth Symphony as you went round. And you went round in this very specific way. You went up, following the arrow, you went here through the Klimt room, which was essentially this idea of art overcoming all the evils in the world. Then you went into the Roller room, around the Klinger, and then out past this room here, which was decorated by Ockenthaler and Ferdinand Andre, and then finally out. So the whole thing was very choreographed and staged. So this is Joseph Ockenthaler's frieze, which you see on this side here, The Joy of Godliness. And on this side, it was Ferdinand Andre's frieze of Man's Courage in Battle. And you could see through, the walls were punctured with openings, so you could see Klinger's sculpture as you went round. And then, so this is a good example of what I mean. Here we are in Klimt's section, his Beethoven Frieze, devoted very much to Schiller's Ode to Joy and Beethoven's Ninth. So here is the beginning of the sequence. So this is man yearning for happiness. We have naked humanity, as you can see, preparing our knight to go into battle. We have two angels already, in fact, holding up the laurel wreath of triumph and sort of preparing him for his quest. In terms of the knight himself, you can see some obvious references to Burne-Jones in the styling of the armor, but you can also see the influence of Renaissance art, particularly here at the famous Uccello at Sir John Hawkwood, which obviously is in Florence. And this is Klimt's Golden Knight of 1903, which, as you can see, also owes a debt to the famous Dürer, The Knight, the Death, and the Devil. And again, the idea is this is our knight preparing himself to go into battle. What's going to really enable him to conquer all the evils in the world is the beauty of art. And that's not just the visual arts, but all the senses, music in particular. And you can see that in the frieze, music one is sort of reprised. It's very much Greco-Roman. As we go through these, look at all of the Egyptian motifs that come through, particularly the all-seeing eyes that you can see down the bottom, as I'll explain their relevance a little later on. And then this is the bit that really upsets people, because people argued that the Secession was giving artists carte blanche to paint ugly things, disturbing things, things that people would really rather not think about at all. And so, you know, it was opening a can of worms. So the idea was that our knight has to overcome all of the evils in the world, which are represented by lust and gluttony and lasciviousness. That's this group here. The Gorgons over on this side, so they're the sisters of Medusa, and above them we have pestilence, death, and famine is actually over here. In my close, this is the body of Typhon, so he's a gorilla with wings and then a snake's body, and he's crushing humanity with his giant paw down here. And this is a close-up of the head of Gluttony, because you can see that it's a type of plaster on Hessian, so it's close to the medium used by Margaret MacDonald, and it's also studded in the same way as her gesso panels with semi-precious stones, shell, so it has a 3D element to it. The important thing is all of these ills can only be overcome with art. And so the climax of the Beethoven Frieze is this kiss to the whole world. However, it has an interesting afterlife. So originally it's this kiss to the whole world, which is this idea, I think, essentially that love conquers all. This could be love in this world and love in the next world. And in fact, at the retrospective, which was held in 1903, of Gustav Klimt's work in the Secession building, it was retitled My Kingdom is Not of This World. And that rather implies that, in fact, that the sort of true transportation or transmutation from earth to heaven will be ultimately the only way that we can achieve this goal. So my kingdom is not of this world is this idea that you're looking towards the afterlife. We're looking at Elysium or Valhalla or whatever perfect afterlife you might imagine. So we think that the 5 female figures here represent the ideal realm: pure joy, pure happiness, pure love. The 5 female figures could represent the 5 senses, okay? Then we have a choir of angels in paradise, and then we have the final part of Schiller's Ode to Joy. Joy, thou gleaming spark divine, this kiss is for the whole world. However, as we will discover, that Gustav Klimt's kisses are not perhaps as straightforward as we might imagine. So here's a close-up, in fact, of the embracing couple. There's been a lot of speculation recently about what it actually means. Klimt doesn't give us diaries, he doesn't write letters, he never gives us an explanation of the complexities of his works. We have to try, if we can, to work them out ourselves. So our embracing figure appears to be in a giant rose bush. That in itself is full of symbolism. I'm thinking particularly of sub rosa or secrets. And then we have water here. And so our recent interpretation is it could represent the 4 elements. The rose bush continues into the thorns that you see here of this disc with a male face and a female face. And here's the water to either side. So it's really all down to what this embrace means. Is this sort of transubstantiation? Is this achievement of pure happiness, this goal? Is it achievable on earth in the form of love, physical and spiritual love? Or is this love only to be achieved in the afterlife? And in order for you to sort of understand the complicated messages that Klimt puts over, it's as well to remind that you're in an era of mysticism. This is W.B. Yeats, who was part of or joined the Golden Dawn. Many artists were very influenced by the idea of mysticism, and there were lots of mystic groups, if I can put it that way. I'm thinking of the Rosicrucians in particular. So this is the secret rose, as in sub rosa, and you can see here the kiss and the roses. There's 3 of them at the top, which can represent the Trinity or the 3 arts, as we've seen. And we've got our theme, as you can see, of the rose thorns. And remember that when Christ was crucified, he was crucified with a crown of rose thorns, which again relates back to one of the emblems of the Virgin. And the tree itself, the rose tree, is growing out of the skeleton here that you see at the bottom. So you're back to that idea again of rebirth and rejuvenation. The important thing is that Klimt was very well read and might well have known very much about the Gates of Dawn, theosophical thought, and even the Rosicrucians. So let us get back to the seedier side of Gustav Klimt, his love life. So one of the interesting things about this theme, Klimt is now the darling of the avant-garde, but he is definitely on the margins, if I can put it that way, of polite society. This is exacerbated by his many affairs. So when Klimt dies in 1918, there are 14 outstanding paternity suits against him. He was quite happy to accept 3 of his children during his lifetime, but who knows exactly. It's a bit of an urban myth, I think, about these 14 illegitimate children, but nevertheless, I think you get the impression that Klimt was not a monogamous type of character. So there's this wonderful cartoon here by Remigus Geiling, who did the mosaic at the beautiful St. Leopold's Church. Klimt transferring the sketch of his faculty painting, that was for the aula of the university philosophy. You can see the 2 beautiful naked maidens. There's always this joke, well, there's always this idea of him leading quite a sort of sensuous life. He took a break every hour and went into an adjacent room to relax and chat for a while with the models who were always there and appear to have always taken their clothes off, according to this cartoon. So he has this gaze-like split between the grand dames that he depicts in his portraits and the working class models. This is very much akin to looking at the pre-Raphaelites, you know, people like Rossetti, John Everett Millais, and well, particularly Rossetti's love life, as you know, is very complicated. So one of his favourite models is known simply as Mizzi, or Marie Zimmermann. He has 2 sons, and not legitimate, but illegitimate. One doesn't die until 1976, Gustav. And Otto sadly dies as a baby. So this is Otto, depicted by Gustav Klimt, just shortly after his death, a particularly poignant work. And we know that when Otto died, Klimt was actually working on Hope 1. And we think, in fact, that this might have inspired the theme of Hope 1, the idea of the dead child and the pregnant woman, again, but this idea of hope. That's Mizzi. So here it is, here's Hope 1. So the model for this, however, was not Mizzi, but Herma. We don't know Herma's surname as far as I know, but there's a very famous quote by Klimt that she had an arse more beautiful and more intelligent than the faces of many other models. Don't think you get away with that one today, do you? So Hope 2 now lives in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and as you can see, it's 1907 to 1908. It'll be shown at the Kunstschau, and it's completely different in style. You can just see on what would be her bump a skull emerging, and it's in his, what I could refer to as in his ribbon of life type of theme, but very different to the original 1903 Hope 1, which is just popping up in the middle for you. So you can see how his style evolves quite quickly. Then this is Maria Uccia. Again, we have another son, another Gustav, and she recently came up for sale at Christie's or Sotheby's as Girl in the Foliage of 1896. And we know that there were 5 illegitimate children from his relationships with Marie Zimmermann, who you see here, and Consuela Ella Huber. So, you know, complicated life with his models, rather like Rossetti. Equally complicated, his relationships with his famous sitters. So this is the infamous Adele Bloch-Bauer. We think that she was the model for Judith 1 and possibly Judith 2, which is, by the way, in the Accademia in Venice. Judith was your classic grande dame. Her features are rather easy to identify with her heavy brows and strong jawline. She's wearing this amazing collar here, which was given to her by her husband. And we think that her affair with Klimt might have lasted something like 10 years, if we go by the idea that she's depicted in Judith 1 as in Judith and Holofernes. It's not John the Baptist, it's Judith and Holofernes, And if we go by the date of Judith #2, with the head of Holofernes here being held in her claw-like hands. The beautiful collar that she's wearing, these collars, these deep collars, were very much a fashion of the day. So here's another of these wonderful collars, but this one's being worn here by Alma Schindler, who becomes Alma Mahler and will eventually become Alma Gropius. She was the stepdaughter of Karl Moll, and one rather gets the feeling that she actually set her sights on Gustav Klimt, who clearly had a reputation as a womanizer. But you can see her here in, again, sort of the artistic dress of the era. So she writes at length about her encounters, her passionate encounter in the studio of Gustav Klimt. But her most famous affair is with Oskar Kokoschka, an affair that nearly destroyed, I think, both of them, and occurred about the time that, in fact, Alma Mahler lost one of her children. So this is The Tempest, or The Bride of the Wind, which is painted by Kokoschka to represent the fury of their affair. So the most, I think, lasting relationship in terms of Gustav Klimt's women is Emily Floger, who we've already established is his sister-in-law. They're together here on Lake Attersee, where he would go every summer for a long holiday. He's not a great traveller. Having said that, of course, he goes to Ravenna in 1903, but most of his summers were spent painting landscapes and enjoying the weather on this big interior lake Attersee, and he would stay with one of the Floger family members at Villa Porlick, and this is photographed in 1909 with Emily in a reformed dress standing up in the boat. So this is the sort of thing that Klimt did on his holidays. Avenue in Schloss Kammer Park always reminds me of Van Gogh, and of course by 1902 Van Gogh was very well known all the way through Europe due to numerous exhibitions. The island in the Attersee, which is the top one, I don't know, that always reminds me of Monet's later paintings, the water lilies. I think it's because it's rather Japanese, and also you can see here that he has moved to his distinctive square format. He much prefers to use this. It really is an unusual format for an artist to adopt. He prefers square rather than rectangular canvases. And here they all are. There's Klimt in the background, the extended Floger family enjoying summers on the Attersee. Emily was very much a new woman. She had, you know, for a long time we thought these dresses were designed either by Klimt or by Coleman Moser. It now appears that they are basically all her own ideas. Emily and her sisters ran a very successful couturier service. At one point they had over 80 women working for them in their workshops in Vienna. You'll see their beautiful showrooms in a minute. Perhaps the confusion as to who designed the dresses goes back to this series of photographs taken by Klimt of Emily on Lake Attersee in 1906. The important thing is you can see that these reformed dresses are loose fitting. They have these wonderful sleeves. They are combined with Wiener Werkstätte jewellery. So I'm showing you an example of Wiener Werkstätte jewellery down in the bottom. And that was, remember, founded in 1903 to provide a total decorative art interior service. So this is his beautiful portrait of Emily, which dates to 1902, which is in the Museum of Stadt Wien, which the family rejected. They didn't like it. And he wrote to Emily that he flogged her off, which I rather like, to one of his private patrons. So the giant thing behind her head, which looks almost like a stained glass window, might relate to one of these magnificent hats that she's seen photographed in here. Look at these distinctive collars, these wonderful dresses, all the patterning on them. It's really like a Gustav Klimt painting, isn't it? I don't never quite know which is chicken and egg, you know, here. Dress first, painting, but there's a definite interconnection. And this is a giant muff. I love it. So here is the Floger sisters salon. So there were three sisters working together. Helena, we've already covered, was Ernst Klimt's widow, and Pauline was the third sister. And they ran the Schwerstin Floger a really upmarket atelier. Well, it's more like a couturier. It's bespoke dresses made in their own workshops, and they have these magnificent, as you can see, interiors created for their salon. And these are by the Wiener Werkstätte. And I think you'll agree that when you see them, you can see some very obvious echoes in the black and white, the groups of squares. If I didn't tell you, you might think they're actually designed by Macintosh. So founded in 1903, the Wiener Werkstätte was indeed a complete service, from clothing to jewellery to cutlery, and this is one of their showrooms in the centre of Vienna. The Wiener Werkstätte does not close until the opening years of the 1930s. It is fascism that finally puts it out of business. So 1932, the Wiener Werkstätte closes. The fruit basket is in the V&A, and you can see what I mean here about looking very much like a Macintosh piece, this dominance of squares and grids. The fruit basket is by Hoffmann. The chair is by Coleman Moser, and again looks rather Macintosh-like, doesn't it, with its checkerboard and black and white contrast and the verticality of the struts. And this is a very beautiful cabinet by Coleman Moser, is to show you that there is, rather like William Morris, who also offered a complete design service. You could have inexpensive things. This is known as glitter work, and it's just a base metal, or you could have bespoke workshop pieces of furniture at the zenith of cabinet making, exotic woods, beautiful inlays, one-off commissions. So again, there was that full range of what the Wiener Werkstätte could offer you. It literally means Viennese workshops. And it's when you get to things like Macintosh's chair for the Willow Tea Rooms of 1904. This is the dividing chair, and that's a stylized tree in the background, because of course they're called the Willow Tea Rooms because that's what Stocky Hall means, grove of willows. And we're comparing it to Hoffmann's iconic Sitzen machine, which I hope came with some cushions, otherwise it was jolly uncomfortable. But you can see here how by 1904, 1905, that the curvy linear elements of Art Nouveau have now been thoroughly minimised in favour of the grid and the square. Of course, the Glasgow Four took it as their logo because there were four in the Glasgow Four. So the square was very obviously representational of their close-knit collaboration. And again, showing you here Marie Henberg in situ in an interior by Hoffmann, you might think again with all those squares, particularly sitting on the carpet, the grid, that you might be looking at a Macintosh design. So there's a very strong interchange of ideas between Macintosh, Margaret MacDonald Macintosh, the Glasgow Four in general, and of course the Wiener Werkstätte. So here is Maria Henberg. She's here. She is in situ above the fireplace, and she's wearing one of Emily Floger, or the Schwersten Floger style dresses. I would love to get into one of these, if only I was the size I was when I was 17. I love those sleeves. So here is Emily modelling, and the dress was actually made for a reconstruction to give you a better idea. You can see where the flower power dresses of the 1970s come from, can't you, when you look at these? And I'm wearing black and white because that very much is the Viennese Secession signature. So here we have Margaret Sonberg-Wittgenstein, another of the Viennese Jewish elite. Gertrude Lowy here, she recently went through Sotheby's and made literally millions. And then Serena Pulitzer, yes, as in the Pulitzer Prize, Lederer at the end. And the most important thing is they are all wearing these diaphanous white dresses that we associate very much with the Floger sisters. It's sort of, again, a symbiotic relationship. If you're going to be painted by Klimt, you're likely to be in one of Emily's dresses. And you can see in the portrait of Margaret Sonderburger-Wittgenstein that we are very much moving towards the zenith of Klimt's style, with that highly decorative background. With, again, is that a window behind her? Is it a reference to stained glass? Is it a halo? The important thing is the background has become totally abstract. We only have one Klimt in this country, and it's the portrait of Hermione Gallia. They fled fascism in the opening years of the 1930s, and much of their furniture, courtesy of the Wiener Werkstätte, can now be seen in the collection in Melbourne, in the Art Gallery of Victoria. But the portrait was separated, and you'll actually see that in the National Gallery in London. The important thing again is that Hermione is in an Emily Floger dress. And then working up to the big ones, Fritze Riedler here, again in the dress, these lovely diaphanous white dresses, and sat in a very strange abstract chair with this stained glass panel behind her head, which in fact appears to be an homage to one of the Velasquez portraits, which was in the Kunsthistorisches collection. So if I just flash back for you, you can see what I mean here. He's made her have a sort of a hairstyle reminiscent of the Infanta, and this may be deliberate on his part to make a connection between his portraits and the great portraits of Velasquez. There was a huge cult of Velasquez in the 19th century. So and here we have the most famous one of all, Adele Bloch-Bauer. This is the height of the golden phase. So Adele, after repatriation, you'll now find her in the Lauder collection in the Neue Gallery, which is just opposite the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She was classic Jewish intelligentsia. She ran or presided over her own salon. She died suddenly, to add to the mystique. She died suddenly, we think of meningitis, when she was only in her early 40s. She left the painting to the Austrian nation, but it was seized by the Nazis, and they always suppressed the Jewish origins of Adele Bloch-Bauer. All of this came to light, of course, in the trial, the repatriation trial that sent this back to the family, alongside 4 other works by Klimt, another portrait of Adele, which you'll see in a minute, and 3 landscapes. So there she is, that's her body. She's got a diaphanous robe behind her. There's a stylized chair here, and a sort of, again, this nimbus around her head. Remember that Klimt went to Ravenna in 1903. He would have seen these famous mosaics. This is the Empress Theodora, who is the wife of Justinian. And Theodora was enjoying something of a vogue at the end of the 19th century. She was beautiful, intelligent, but she was also said to have been a bit of a Josephine Bonaparte. She may have begun her career, if I can put it that way, as a dancer before Justinian fell in love with her and married her. She was older, just as in the relationship of Napoleon and Josephine, who, as we know, had various skills in the bedroom. Theodora was enjoying something of a vogue at the end of the 19th century, thanks to Sarah Bernhardt. So again, I'm showing you here from the 1890s, Sarah in full costume for the role of Theodora, who was essentially a femme fatale. So was this again Klimt's idea to present Adele Bloch-Bauer as a modern Theodora, very much a new woman? And of course, Adele Bloch-Bauer and his relationship with her, which was just as complex apparently as that with Emily Floger, again seems to relate to the story of the kiss itself. So this is the Palais Stoclet frieze. We are back in the Mack Museum. This again hangs very close to the work by Margaret MacDonald Mackintosh, so you can get a better idea of me now saying how big they are. They are of a similar sort of size. So this is an amazing mosaic created by Leopold Forster to designs by Gustav Klimt. For many years, we thought that they represented expectation and fulfillment, just like the Beethoven Frieze. We have the expectation on one side, which we now know is a dancer, and on this side we have fulfillment. So remember, fulfillment could be earthly fulfillment or it could be spiritual fulfillment, remembering all of that interest in quasi-mysticism. I'm thinking particularly of the Gates of Dawn, which was a breakaway group from the theosophical ideas of Madame Blavatsky, if you've ever gone into all of that. Anyway, so here is the dancer, or Tanzarine. We now believe that this is the story of Osiris and Isis. This is a very complicated creation myth. So whereas in the Beethoven Frieze, Klimt was trying to represent all the evils that have to be overcome in the world, this was a much more positive emblem of spring, rejuvenation and revival. Osiris was murdered and his body split into many parts. His sister Isis then goes and gathers all of these body parts together and brings him back to life. So it's like an Easter myth, I suppose, a regeneration, a recreation story of Osiris and Isis. And this may account for all the all-seeing eyes, as they are emblematic of Osiris all over the frieze itself. And it was to go here in the triumph of the Wiener Werkstätte, this amazing Gesamtkunstwerk, where everything was unified into one total work of art. And Klimt's frieze was to decorate the dining room, you'll be pleased to know. So in the middle, we now believe that this is a giant column. It's a phallic emblem. Evidently, when you were celebrating the revival of Osiris, these would mark the various places where his body parts had been scattered. His penis, however, I'm afraid, was thrown into the Nile and eaten by the fish. Sorry about that graphic detail. But nevertheless, there was a union between Osiris and Isis that brought forth yet one more child. I love it. The car emblem, which means soul or life. These eagles, you know, all of these things can be picked out in the expectation and fulfillment frieze. So here, the butterflies represent the soul, having undergone its transformation into the afterlife, and you can see them here above the phallic bush. And these are the all-seeing eyes of Osiris, and these very obvious, rather menacing, eagle-like Egyptian birds in the tree of life in the center. You need a PhD to enjoy dinner in the Palais Stoclet. And that leads up to the most famous kiss of all, which again, there is much discussion about its meaning. We know that the model for the man is definitely Gustav Klimt, and he has ivy intertwines in his hair. The woman, well, it's one of his models like Mitzi, but it's probably likely to be Emily. This is a jewel that he made, in fact, to gift to Emily. You can see a similar embrace and her name down the side. That's the sketch for it that came earlier. And you can see it's not a very happy embrace. She appears to be pulling away. Again, we have these very sort of expressive hands. But the important thing is it seems again here to be representing the Paolo and Francesca story, which is very autobiographical because, of course, they are really brother and sister-in-law, as in the story. She's all soft shapes, he's all hard shapes. So we think it's based on Rodin's The Kiss, which comes from Rodin's great project, The Gates of Hell. So Francesca da Rimini and Paolo Malatesta are brother and sister-in-law. Their love is transgressive. When they kiss, they are murdered and cast into purgatory. So please don't send Rodin's The Kiss as a wedding card. Going back to Klimt's The Kiss, more recently there's been much discussion of the weed all over her legs. So some people say that it's Paolo and Francesca, and they're about to tip into the abyss that is purgatory because their love is transgressive. Others are now suggesting that she's some form of mermaid who has come to earth and grown her legs, rather like in the story by Hans Christian Andersen, That Little Mermaid. And these aquatic plants, as you can see, can be picked up in the earlier Serpents one or Girlfriends. So he was very fond of Lord Leighton. He knew a lot about our preeminent president of the Royal Academy, who died in 1896. This is Lord Leighton's Fisherman and the Siren. And then we've also got the wonderfully named Karl Ernst Rudolf Heinrich Salem Lehman. Gosh, again, because I wanted to show you that she's now developed her legs. So it's this idea again, as in the story of the Little Mermaid, of the femme fatale coming out of the sea and seducing our hero. Now here you can actually see them in situ at the Kunstschau. So in 1905, there was another falling out, and the Klimt group left the Secession, who are now seen to be bogged down in landscape and in impressionistic style, whereas the Klimt group were actually moving out of symbolism and into expressionism. The 1908 Kunstschau, which was an extravagant affair on a purpose-built site, gleaming white pavilions, housing this wonderful display of Klimt's work. It was the triumph, in fact, of his career. There's Adele, there's the kiss, and most, I think, importantly, there's a large sunflower in between. And then this is the poster for the Kunstschau art show of 1908, staged by the Klimt group. It was definitely a turning point. So the 1908 exhibition was a showcase for Oskar Kokoschka, and we are definitely, as you can see here, moving into what will become German Expressionism. Pietà, or Murder, Hope of Women, was an outrageous play which was staged, which actually caused a riot. Oh dear. And most importantly, Oskar Kokoschka at this stage, perhaps walking in the footsteps of Beardsley, was really making his name as a graphic artist, particularly with his sequence of illustrations to The Dreaming Boy. He was also responsible for the poster. So the sunflower, very important for me, Oscar Wilde's flower, symbol of hopeless longing and unfulfilled desire, painted many, many times by Vincent van Gogh, probably to denote his own passion for Gauguin, which was unrequited. And as you can see, it's in between Adele Bloch-Bauer here on the wall at the Kunstschau and the kiss. So we just don't know whether the kiss represents his relationship with Emily Floger or his equally fraught relationship with Adele Bloch-Bauer. They're cloaked because he used one of his working class models for the figure in the painting. The Three Ages of Woman was also shown at the Kunstschau of 1908, and Klimt was very much president of this newly founded association of Austrian artists, the Künstlerbund, as it's known, or the Klimt group. And, you know, just like our pre-Raphaelites, he frequently looked back for inspiration to medieval art. So his Three Ages of Woman, which is now in Rome, very clearly references the famous work by Hans Baldung Grier, which is actually in the Prado. So it's to remind you that beauty is brief. And here again, the sort of symbol of the woman past her sell-by date, if I can put it so bluntly, and the symbol of motherhood in the foreground. It's that sort of, again, it seems to look forward, doesn't it, almost to the sort of Pietà theme of the dead Christ in his mother's arm. The sort of psychosexual analytics come into play, particularly with works like this. Danae was also shown at the 1908 Kunstschau, which is one of the masterpieces, of course, of Gustav Klimt. And so the interpretation of this is, again, I'm afraid, quite lurid. She could be indulging in what they genteelly refer to as self-love. Look at the rather pink cheeks. But the golden shower itself goes to the heart of the eroticism of the era and to the infamous golden shower of Havelock Ellis. Death and Life here, a late work by Gustav Klimt, clearly shows the influence, the darker influence of Egon Schiele. So we have this stream of humanity over here and death with the club and the skull. Here, the Virgin, this is in San Francisco. You can see here, now this is the Egyptian Ka symbol, again for soul. And the theme there is the Virgin, and very similar, the baby. It sold after Klimt's death in 1919 to Otto and Eugenia Primavesi, who took on backing the Wiener Werkstätte after Fritz Warndorfer's bankruptcy. So Adele Bloch-Bauer, again, this is the second version, shows you how his style changes. It was bought by Oprah Winfrey for a modest $88 million, but she's made a good profit out of it, selling it for $150 million in 2016. And this is just to remind you that, you know, these paintings are superstars. People want them because they know that if they acquire them for their institution, they're going to get all the visitors that they want. So here are Otto and Eugenia Primavesi, and in all of these paintings, if I can just go briefly back to Adele Bloch-Bauer, she's likely to be in a Floga creation, and these are either in a Floga creation or dresses supplied, reformed dresses supplied actually from the workshops of the Wiener Werkstätte. So here is Eugenia Primavesi in the photograph. This is her portrait, and this is her daughter, Maida. So you have an entire subsection of Austrian society supporting the secession and the Wiener Werkstätte. And Elisabeth Lederer, as in the Lederer family, we've met them already. They are going to be major patrons of both Klimt and Egon Schiele. It's their collection, remember, taken to the castle Immendorf that is lost in the fire. So this is Baroness Elisabeth, these lovely names, Eckenhoff-Echt, Elisabeth Lederer, as she's over here again in this amazing sort of white couture dress, which is likely to be a Floga creation, but the background inspired by a Korean vase that was in Klimt's collection. And then Frederica Maria Beer at the top here, again in a Wiener Werkstätte creation, with again this reference to this Korean battle scene in the background, is by Klimt. But the lower one, the rather unusual portrait of Frederica Maria Beer, is by Egon Schiele. It's just to emphasize how they are sort of, well, basically Klimt is being very magnanimous and introducing the young Egon Schiele to his patron. So Klimt dies in the February. His last studio has now become an homage to his life. These were the paintings left unfinished at his death. The Bride, which you see in the background, and Lady with a Fan. But I'm going to leave you with the last couple of slides, in the sense that if it wasn't for Vienna, Vienna was the crucible of modernism in terms of architecture and the decorative arts. We certainly wouldn't have the Bauhaus if it wasn't for Otto Wagner's use style, exemplified by the first modern building in Europe, 1904 to 1907, which is the Postal Savings Bank, with its wonderfully functional interior. So the reason why Vienna has become so important, it's not just about the secession. It looks forward to what's going to happen in the post-First World War era. Expressionism will take roots in Germany and flourish into a major school. And it will definitely be out of buildings like the Postparkkasse that we get the evolution of the Bauhaus style, founded, of course, the Bauhaus in 1919. So it's the end of one story and the beginning of another.